If you've gone outside today, if you've left your house or left your work or basically done anything outside, you're probably being monitored and you don't even know it. You're not consenting to it, and it's being done by organizations that are frankly going to surprise you. It's not some secret intelligence agency, it's not the government overall, it's corporate entities. Welcome to Legitimate Cybersecurity. My name is Frank Downs, and I'm here with Dustin Brewer. And today we're going to be talking about specific monitoring that's happening to you that you really can't stop. You didn't consent to it. Nobody wants it, but you're being monitored. So, Dustin, this has been something that we've been concerned about for a while, but usually it's been the big brother angle. Now we actually have organizations that have found a very crafty way in which they can monitor us. And what they're using are these tools called automated license plate readers. And that's just the start. I think it's really kind of a misnomer in this case because it's doing more than just reading license plates.
Yeah.
But these are systems, they're cameras, they're solar powered, they have batteries, they're interconnected, and they're using AI to monitor all of us as we drive by, walk by, and basically go about our day. What can you tell me about these types of cameras that you've seen in the past? And I've got to tell you, specifically for me, I'm kind of shocked it took this long for these types of cameras to come on to the scene because you and I have been building stuff like this for a long time. But talk to me a little bit about the components of cameras like these and why are they so easy to build? I mean, you're seeing what we're seeing right here are huge meshes, huge thousands and thousands of
Mhm.
networks that are everywhere and anywhere. Why is it so cost effective to make these?
Yeah, I mean, it's just gotten more cost effective in general to get, higher end camera equipment and higher end computing equipment, right? So I remember when we were first starting out, like the cheapest thing you could get was something called a gum sticks computer, right?
I
And I
do.
think those were like 400 or 500 bucks a piece. And they had, it was like the oldest hardware. It was like an IoT device, basically. But it was like the oldest hardware. It had all these modules, but the modules were very specific, and you like had to build your own driver software for it. It ran on a really old version of Linux. It was kind of a pain in the neck, right? And so if you wanted to attach any kind of like 1080p camera to it, forget it because you weren't going to, unless you were writing your own software, writing your own driver software, you weren't going to be able to do any of this kind of stuff, right? So now we have these, completely modularized setups. So you can get something like a Raspberry Pi for 50 bucks, right? It's 20 times more powerful than the gum sticks ever was. It can run modern versions of Linux. There's huge community support for it out there. And this goes right back into kind of open source software. And I think we've talked about this before on this podcast where open source software is great. Anybody, anywhere, it really kind of lends to the accessibility of software and hardware and learning those things, right? Because it's free and you have this support system underneath it. And so what we're starting to see is a little bit of the downside of this where it's like it's free for people, but it's also free for vendors and it's free for technology companies, which means that they can spend a lot less time and a lot less money doing things that would take them, would have taken them more resources to do in the past. And so we have cheap hardware, we have open source software that can run most of the things. There's going to be some proprietary stuff written in the background, but we can start focusing on what the proprietary stuff is, right? It's this cognitive offloading that happens when we're like, hey, we've already built this system can do anything you want, and now you just need to write the software to do what it is you want. So if that's tracking, if that's taking pictures, not only that, now we have the cloud. So we have this humongous storage that is now accessible and is somewhat inexpensive, comparatively speaking, and also redundant. So it's not like something can go down and all of a sudden you've lost all of that data for that day. No. We've got redundancy built in so that something can go down. You're not going to skip a beat, right? You're going to have that data. And so we have these high resolution cameras. We have these, really great pieces of hardware. We have this open source software that in libraries that can do most of the work for you. And then you have on the back end, you have this whole infrastructure built towards data redundancy and data storage. So that's why I'm guessing it's taken so long, if you will, for it to get there. And if you pair that all with in the United States of America, we don't have a privacy law. We don't have an overarching, citizen privacy law. We've got privacy laws specific to industries, but we do not have any kind of private. We've got, FERPA for education. We've got HIPAA for healthcare. We've got several, Sarbanes-Oxley, GLBA for banking and financial institutions. And then there is the California Consumer Protection Act, which is somewhat more of a privacy thing. But we don't have an overarching thing that's telling companies that they can't do this. So why would they not do it?
Yeah, 100%. going to get deeper into that as we go further in. One of the things I want to explain for the listeners and the viewers too is these are not what you're used to. Everyone's used to the red light traffic cameras that take your
Hmm.
picture if you go through a red light. You're committing an actual quote unquote crime, right? It's not, I'm sure there's lawyers out there that'll be like, well, Frank, it's a misdemeanor or something, like, violation. Right. You're doing something you shouldn't be doing, right?
Ticket.
You are running a red light. Everyone's familiar with those. These cameras, though, are a lot more subtle in that they're all black. They look like they blend in almost. They're very easy to miss because of the size they are. They usually go up on these poles with these small, they do not need or require much power. So a very basic kind of solar panel is something that can power these things. So they're very easy to miss. They're something that is just rather innocuous and they're sitting out there. So when you're thinking about this, and what's interesting is on Reddit, there have been several posts that I love there's a subreddit called What Is It, right? And it basically is a subreddit that specifically discusses, hey, I see this. I don't know what it is. Here's a photo of it. Can somebody tell me what it is? The thing that's really gross is half the time they're like, oh, yeah, that's an infection, or those are, bacterial molds or something along those lines in like hotel rooms or whatever. And it's like, yikes. Or they find like, I'm going to double down on that one. They find weird red spots on the hotel mattress, and it's like, well, guess what? You got bed bugs. It's gnarly. But in this case, what we've been seeing a lot more of on that subreddit are these odd things that kind of look like cameras, which they do, if you look close enough, look like cameras, but not in the traditional sense that you're used to. And more often, people are realizing, well, these are surveillance cameras. These quote unquote license plate reader cameras that are out there. And it's really interesting because when people, as I mentioned, when people think about this, they don't think about just the camera themselves. They think of Big Brother, right? They think, hey, somebody's monitoring me. But what's actually happening here is it's something a bit more arguably insidious. It's profiteering. It's a for-profit company that's out there. And this specifically is called Flock Surveillance. And I want to talk a little bit about who this organization is, who is Flock, what they're doing, and where they came from. It was founded in 2017 by a bunch of Georgia Tech, I think, Georgia Tech graduates, alumni, who came together under CEO Garrett Langley. And what was interesting is they kind of put two and two together, something you and I have seen more in the past. They took this idea of a small camera that could be powered and so forth, and they decided to go and get some VC funding. And they did. They were able to get some VC funding and get backing to the tune of $275 million. And I got to tell you right now, Dustin, separate from all this, we just need to find the people with a ton of money because of all the ideas we have. The main ingredient that we're missing is $275 million. I think at
Yes.
this point. Not
That's
that I'd
that's a
want to
big
use it for
ingredient
this,
too.
right?
That's
Yeah,
like the flour for the bread, right? Like if you just mix a bunch of water and salt together, it's not gonna do anything.
hell of an ingredient these days. But they were able to get $275 million and use that to get a valuation of 7.5 billion. $7.5 billion. Think about that. They must have made a pretty compelling case to get that $275 million up front. And at the end of the day, it's, hey, we're going to capture a lot of data. We're going to capture a lot of pictures, a lot of videos. We're going to make this huge database. And then, well, there's a lot of things that we can use this database for. And that's where the $7.5 billion valuation comes in. And what they actually do in this case is they state that they do something called vehicle fingerprinting. Let's talk about vehicle fingerprinting here, right? Because this is where things get a little bit more questionable than just the license plate readers. Flock is not just taking pictures of license plates. Don't get me wrong, license plates are very important for identifying cars and so forth. It's a legal requirement. But they're also getting photos of makes, models, specific dents, maybe the type of person that's driving it. And when you apply all this to an AI model, right? A bunch of data like this, looking for similarities where that's the main goal of the model, you're able to now track individuals who you didn't consent to this. You don't want to be part of it. It doesn't matter what you want. They're right here. They're filming you. You're going by, and maybe they're tracking you by your license plate. Maybe they're tracking you by the type of vehicle you're driving. At the end of the day, it's retaining that information and it's selling it to whoever wants it. Because again, this is a private company that is working specifically to make money. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They don't even care about people in general. They care about what most organizations care about, and don't let anyone mislead you, raising more revenue. And in this instance, they've created a data set that many organizations can buy. Let's talk about who's buying all of this information. You have states, you have federal agencies. Dustin, you've even got HOAs. You have
Yeah,
HOAs buying this information. Now let's talk about
I
that for a
believe
minute.
it.
Are you part of an HOA?
Yes, kind of. Like one of those, like, you can, opt in the HOA, like, you can
First
pay
of
us
all,
if you want.
yeah, I'm in an HOA. I hate it. I hate it. I mean, and I'm on the board too, and I hate being there. I hate being there. I hate it. I hate that HOAs exist, but I also hate that they have to exist because if you don't have one, then it gets real gnarly. But can you imagine a you know the types of people who work out with HOAs and decide to be on those boards? I guess this includes me too. But you want to talk about the pettiest fights and the pettiest arguments I've ever seen in my life are all part of homeowners associations. Now you want to enable these homeowners associations with surveillance footage that can track people throughout the neighborhood. Come on, come on. What's that going to do? What's that going to do? But keep in mind, the camera is just the beginning. As Dustin pointed out earlier, and Dustin, I want to talk more about this, right? The camera's bad, right? We can say subjectively because objectively, a camera isn't necessarily bad, but how the data is used can be very concerning. I want you to talk to me more about how you feel with data retention, data security, data ownership, data purchasing, because at the end of the day, the data is the most powerful tool here, right? Flock has gone on record saying their default data retention is 30 days. Based on your experience with organizations who are retaining data, how often do you find that they consistently stay within their stated requirements and goals of data retention?
I don't think I've met with one organization that adheres to that properly. So whatever their if they have a policy is number one, right? So I guess it's good they do have a policy. They retain it for 30 days. And then the question is, like, what is it that do they purge that data? Do they sanitize that data? And then let's talk about the differences there, right? Purging the data means that they delete it, right? They delete it, it's gone, out there in the digital ether somewhere. If you sanitize data, then they're like, well, we'll scrub certain things off of that data, but we're still going to retain it, for training purposes, to train their AI or to do something like that, right? In which case, a very smart person or an AI could probably go in there and reconstruct who that data belongs to, or at least, start building a profile off that person again. It's not that hard to do. Intelligence communities do it all the time.
Allegedly. Allegedly.
Allegedly. That's what I read on Wikipedia. Um, and so we have this, and look, to your point earlier, where it's like inherently there's nothing wrong with the camera stuff, right? We've seen Europe's been using cameras like for years to solve crimes, solve murder,
London, yeah,
solve
isn't
assault.
London like the most heavily surveilled
Yeah,
city in the world?
and to be fair, it does seem to keep things safer. It does, it helps law enforcement organizations to solve crimes and to to put bad guys behind bars and all that stuff. And of course that's not what we're really talking about here, right? We're talking about, the expected amount of privacy that you have for just driving your car down the road. Now it's a public road. It's a public owned. Your tax dollars go to paying for the upkeep, the building of it, the everything else. And so that's one thing. The other half of this is, how does this private organization get access to put a camera on a public road? Why are we privatizing our public roads, right? And so then that's a whole nother ball of wax that I'm not sure if we're going to get into today, but if we do, then we'll talk
Well,
about it.
guess
But
what? Guess what? We are. But I
yeah,
really
we're
like
good.
your point there. The whole point here is the camera is only the beginning. The real power is in the network itself, specifically because Flock markets cross jurisdictional connectivity to thousands of agencies. Literally, they're using the term nationwide network, like they're AT&T or something. They're breaking barriers that were not there in the past. They're cross state barriers, right? The state lines don't matter in this instance when it comes to Flock. They can surveil in every single state and sell that to anyone who wants it. Nothing is stopping them currently in that, and which brings me to the point that you were about to jump on. Government surveillance is scary, right? But at least it comes with a defined target for oversight.
Yes.
Commercial surveillance creates a fog, right? The data lives in systems built by a private vendor, controlled by whoever's bought it, and is shared across networks that citizens often can't see. So you kind of have a separate private It almost reminds me of the Pinkertons. You remember the Pinkertons?
Yeah.
Before there was the Secret Service and before there was, the FBI and stuff like that, there were the Pinkertons. And let's talk about the Pinkertons for a bit because they were corrupt as all get out. What started as a great idea of, hey, we're a special service that can provide you security and make you safe, turned into basically a semi state endorsed corporate mafia that, especially during the boom era when there was the expansion west and you had these railroad robber barons and everyone else, they would send Pinkertons under the auspices of protecting their corporate assets and basically send thugs that would beat up anyone who got in their way,
Yeah.
right? And it was a little hard. In fact, fun fact, the Pinkertons, it is now illegal for any Pinkerton to enter the state of Ohio and operate there. There you go. Now, they've since gone the way of the dodo. I think last I checked on them, they're owned by a Swiss company or whatever they turned into. They're owned by the Swiss. The Pinkertons are done. But there was a time in the United States where there was this private corporate entity that was providing basically government bagman services that was uncontrollable and really caused some legitimate harm if you look into their rather dark history. Here we have Flock that is almost in the same way acting like a government intelligence agency without even being a government collection intelligence agency, right? They're a separate organization that is out there that anybody can buy access to this data set and use it however they want. And what I think is rather interesting, and what I'd like to know from, and there's been even more concern. That's not to say there hasn't been concern from organizations that see this and know that it's happening. For example, the ACLU has publicly criticized these license plate recognition cameras and capabilities and how the data sharing is getting a little out of hand. But it doesn't seem to be stopping. Dustin, talk to me about the types of organizations that are using this and how the government's involved and what you think should change here, especially as, I mean, like I said, I'm not saying it's a government collection agency because I don't want to take the words out of my mouth the wrong way. This is an organization that is creating a product that is rife for abuse. What
Yes.
are your concerns there? And especially when it comes to governance, you mentioned governance a little bit more. I imagine, and here's your softball, I imagine there's a lot of disparate governance aspects to take into consideration when it comes to the people who are buying this. And that in part might make it hard to actually get for individuals to get their hands around it. What type of
Right.
government's concerns are there?
So and it's interesting because we've seen kind of some public outrage towards privacy online, right? The cookies and the ad trackers and our phones and our everything from our phones to our computers have, unique tracking IDs that are attached to them, right?
Which is interesting because Google got in trouble with this, like what, 10, 15 years ago when they were making their Google Maps. For those
Yeah.
who don't know, when they were making their Google Maps that you can street view, that you can drop your little person and see, they were also collecting Wi-Fi packets at the same time. I don't know if it was the Supreme Court, but one of the courts actually hit them down on that, saying you can't do that. You can't collect Wi-Fi packets. That actually counts as surveillance because of how they were collecting. Now, it was a technicality because they had some scripts that they made themselves. If they had just been using open source to collect those packets, it would have been
Right.
fine,
I
by
do
the way.
remember that.
Super sketchy there, little concerning. But for some reason, that gets knocked down, but this doesn't. I
Yep.
interrupted you. Continue.
No, no, no. It's fine. It's a valid point. And one of the things that I was thinking about first off with these things is like it's also really cheap just to put like a Wi-Fi card in monitor mode and start also attaching, MAC addresses of phones to the drivers. Now, most MAC addresses are randomized now. Excuse me. And so, most modern devices kind of randomize those things so it's harder to track. But there's still other ways. There are other radios on your device that do not randomize that can be tracked relatively easily with small camera equipment or a secondary module to look at radio frequencies. So that's kind of scary within itself. So back to governance, right? You mentioned the government is one thing, right? So if the government's buying this data, okay, like there still are protections, there still are constitutional rights, there still are a lot of things that the government has to adhere by. If a private organization is the one who is buying these things or, whoever, we don't know what's going on with it then. We don't know who's got it. And like everybody's like, well, what does it matter? Why would somebody care about that kind of stuff? Excuse me. And I think, that's the slippery slope, right? And we've talked about regulations before on this podcast. where if you don't tell a private company to stop doing something that is not currently illegal and it's, and it's what they're doing is making them money, guess what they're not going to stop doing? They're not going to stop doing whatever it is that's making them money, that's saving them money, that whatever it is, right? Regulations are required because in the United States of America, at least, I've heard it said that private organizations should be treated as people, right? And
Well,
so
I mean,
private
there's that whole
organizations,
Citizens United aspect.
right?
That silly old Supreme Court.
There you go. So it's a very difficult thing to, and look, I understand also, I hear the argument of, regulations also stifle innovation. I can see that too. Okay. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do see that argument and I understand where people are coming from with things like that. The United States government is beholden to things like the Constitution, to US codes, to laws, to regulations. Organizations are held to regulations and some laws, but it's not the same type of scrutiny and, as you mentioned, oversight that is happening with a private organization. With an organization, you maybe have a board, you've got maybe got a C-suite, but if you're just talking about 5 guys from Georgia Tech, and then
And
that's your
Five
board.
Guys and 7.5 billion bucks now.
That's your board, that's your governing body, that's your oversight. It's 5 people, and I guess I shouldn't say guys, I should be inclusive here. 5 people that are possibly controlling all of this data,
Barely
and
trust
who
Five
gets
Guys
it?
to make me a burger, let alone make my whole, country safe. But continue.
Oh my goodness. But anyway, back to you, Frank. Like, what's your take on this? What are you sniffing here?
I think that you're correct. And it gets even more concerning because with the private data, the types of organizations that are using it are at all different levels of government. You have local companies, you have local HOAs that are using it, you have cities that are using it, you have states that are using it, you have federal agencies that are using it, and
Yep.
different laws apply or don't apply across all of them. You have all these different organizations that are using the data in different ways, and if you want to opt out of this, you have to go to all those different organizations, all those different companies, right? Or state agencies or whatever, and petition them. And they all have different processes. It's not tenable, it's not feasible. And there's no real way, in Flock's defense, there's no real way to just go and to the actual core of the concern, which is Flock, and get them to stop because they're not doing anything illegal. It's this whole idea of, well, I just have the data. Just making and creating the data isn't illegal. It's what you do with it, which kind of then can get to the whole guns argument. Guns are not bad. It's what you do with a gun and stuff like that, which, okay, we're not going to get into a gun debate here because we don't want to lose our 3 listeners slash viewers, right? You start talking about weapons, you're going to lose 50% of any listener base. But trying to go to Flock and actually stop them there is not successful, right? It's not something you do because you can say, hey, you can even go and say, Flock, don't you dare record me and don't you do anything. They can say, we're not. We're just taking metrics of the area. And it's one of the ways to
Yeah.
get around of a lot of legal arguments because they say, well, it's public view and things like that. And that's the difference. But with Google, right? With the Google example, with Google, it wasn't like just public view. These are packets that, to an extent, were out and about. And it worked to an extent for Google until it didn't. Here, yeah. If the equivalent is we're just standing outside and looking, you can't stop us kind of thing. There's kind of a point there. So trying to stop how the data is used is then the next goal. But when you have, state, city, federal, these are a lot of different laws and regulations that are at play. It becomes almost impossible for anyone to have any kind of realistic expectations that things can be stopped with how this information is being used. So the real issue is governance once the system exists. Like who can use it becomes a moving target. And states, to their credit, are doing a little bit of effort, but it's been kind of few and far between. The example here is Washington State, Illinois, Massachusetts are all trying to put different guardrails on here, trying to limit how it's used and how it's not used. And there even have been a few federal lawmakers that are trying to take the angle of, well, what if this database gets exploited? So taking the cybersecurity angle, saying you've got this
Yeah.
very sensitive information, we've got
I
to keep
love
it
it.
safe.
It's a good point.
It is a good point. It is a good point because if you think about it, this data set is very sensitive at the end of the day. Anyone who can exploit this data set gets something arguably more meaningful than if they just got regular information about who you are. Because I can get your address, Dustin, I can get your phone number, and these are data points about you. But if I know a predictable pattern of where you go every day and what you do and where you've been based upon this type of information, I can build a pattern of life on you. I can understand where you are. I can understand where you're going, and I can make assumptions based on where you're going, why you're going there, and what you're doing there. If I just want to surprise you somewhere, or God forbid anyone wants to get abducted, you know, hey, it can be done. And as a result, this has become very sensitive data that needs to be, from my perspective, treated appropriately and protected as such.
Yes.
Do I think it is? I don't know. And I'm going to be specifically blunt. Your data that this company has taken about you and from you, all this information, this company knows where you go, when you go, what you're wearing when you get there, how long you've been there, when you come home, right? It can build a pattern of life based off this information the company has made. Flock may be keeping that information safe. Let's assume Flock is keeping that information safe when they collect it. Are you going to tell me the clients of Flock who are buying this information, state governments, other companies, HOAs, yeah, the local town mayor, right? Do they keep the information safe? Do they keep their credentials from being reused? Do they keep CSV files or Excel files they download on your comings and goings secure? I'll tell you what, we both work in cybersecurity right now, and I just the other week was on a call with a company that still keeps their passwords in an unencrypted password list on their desktop called passwords.txt. No.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you may think that Flock keeps the data secure does not mean that the people who are buying the surveillance information on you that you did not consent to, that you probably don't want, are keeping that information safe. And now, welcome to the world that Dustin and I live in, because we've been compromised out the ass for the last 20 years, whether it's OPM hacks, whether it's Equifax. Now you're living in our world, because not only is that information out there, you can't control it. And it's really hard, Dustin. I'm getting a little angry about this. It's really
No,
hard
it's okay.
for me to
And
maintain positivity, because I feel like we're looking at the void and there's no way to get your arms around it. Because once the compromise goes, identity is meaningless. Once everyone has your identity, once everyone has your innermost travels and things, what matters, you know?
we've talked about this with TikTok too, and I think that the kind of response, the general response from people who use TikTok, or from really when we talk about anything privacy related, is, well, why do I care? I don't have anything to hide. Why would I care? And I think you summed it up pretty well in that, in that last diatribe. No, in your last.
Wow, it's not even 11 and I've had my first diatribe. Great. Day's going awesome.
In the last what's the word, in your last monologue, let's
Exposition.
put it that way.
Yeah, there we
Yeah,
go.
exposition, there you go. It's ways that you don't think about as a regular person, as an everyday person, because you don't have to think about these things. Meanwhile, Frank and I, who work in security, think about these things on a regular basis. Like, this is what we're supposed to do. And this is where, like, expertise kind of comes in. And we've seen, we've heard of the death of expertise, and a Dunning-Kruger effect. And there's all these different, ways to verbalize, how, look, a really simple way to put it is that, if your toilet starts spewing water out of it, you're going to go try to fix that yourself, or are you going to call a plumber? You're going to call a plumber, right?
I'm going to
Because
call
they're
an
going to know how to
exorcist,
fix it.
actually, because that's really scary.
Yeah, might need to call somebody. I might need to call the city at that point. But look, like, you want to call the experts in. I think I've said this before on this podcast, where there are no experts in cybersecurity, but the closest you're going to come is me and Frank, at least for two examples.
Not to
Two
toot our
examples of
horn, but it is
yeah,
called legitimate cybersecurity if you're listening or
two
watching.
examples of experts in cybersecurity are Frank and I. Now, look, do we make mistakes? Yep. Do we accidentally click on the links? Sure. Do we store our passwords in clear text on a file called passwords.txt?
Nope.
No, we don't do that. But is it possible that we could get hacked or anything? Absolutely. And that's not necessarily what expertise is designed for anyway. What it is designed for, though, is that if you have a group of experts who are telling you that it's important for you to keep your privacy, keep your data private, and they give you several examples of why, like Frank just did, and several scenarios of how it could be used against you. For you to say that's not important, or I don't care about that, maybe you don't, but You probably do, and you probably do in ways that you haven't even been able to think about yet. So just throwing it out there that, I get it. You want to use the TikToks, you want to use the YouTubes, you want to get on social media, you want to drive your car around and have people take pictures of you and not care about it. But you do. But you do care.
And I want to double down on
And
that
and you might
because,
not care for yourself, but you might care for some loved ones you have, or for your children, or for the next generation, or whatever it is. Go ahead, Frank.
and I want to double down on that because saying you have nothing to hide won't help.
No.
Because I'm going to give you just an example here, right? Say there was a robbery, right? A bank robbery, and you drove by at a key time when the robbers were leaving and running away. Why were you there? What were you doing? Yeah, you were just maybe just driving by. You weren't doing anything wrong, but now you've got the police at your house saying, well, you were in the area at the same time. What were you doing there? God forbid you have two banks on your way to work and they both get robbed as you're driving by. Now you're a person of interest, right? Now
Yeah.
they say, because, these cops, not all cops, but it's understandable how a detective might think, well, this can't be a coincidence. You were there at the same time.
Time,
Or
distance,
what if
direction.
something happened after the fact and they wanted to know about all the people that were in the area at the time, right? Even if you had nothing to do with anything that happened, there's the retroactive searching that can be used to place you at a place that, you know, you just happen to be. Say someone's got a grudge against you, right? And you actually haven't done anything wrong. Like you happen to be in an area of something that did go wrong. This has me so stressed about apartment complexes, for example, Dustin, right? If a crime happens at an apartment
Yeah.
complex, just because something's happening in one apartment doesn't mean the other 60 apartments had anything to do with it. But now there's footage of all these different cars and so forth that are there and the people that might be, well, you live here, so I'm simply saying you cannot just say I don't do anything wrong and feel that you're safe. Or you can, but also you probably need some medicine then at that point because that is not a realistic thing to think.
We are not licensed psychologists.
I don't even play one on TV. My
That's
gosh, I could never be a psychologist. I'd go crazy at that point. So what are
man.
the things that you can do? Well, not very much at this point. Let me be honest with you. There's very little that you can do to realistically feel that you are safe from this type of surveillance within the next year or so. But there are places that you can start in order to try and make change happen. And I sound like a Schoolhouse Rock episode right now, but talk
Let's
to
hear
your
it.
local lawmaker. All right.
Yeah.
Petition your local lawmaker, petition your federal level lawmaker. I know, hey, if you want to feel like you got some more leverage, talk to your state level one, right? These state congressional members feel really, really important about being elected members of state delegations, right? When really they overlook a county. But in this case, it's even the counties that are doing it. Okay? You have to reach out to them. You need to demand that there's some type of policy change, that something happens. And you can also put up signage. I can tell you one thing, if you actually put up a do not do not surveil and I do not consent to surveillance signage on a vehicle or on a house, there you go. Then you actually have proof that you can point out, man, if you're thinking about doing some type of legal action against these organizations, you can have a sign up that explicitly says, I do not consent to my monitoring or surveillance. If you are willing to get bumper stickers that tell people, random people, how upset you are about Doge, you can take the time to get a bumper sticker in this instance if you really want to that says, I do not consent to surveillance or something along those lines. Okay. These are the types of small things that you can do. Make sure, even pushing security requirements, pushing legislation that requires MFA for certain types of businesses. These are things that are required. But until we get something that really takes a hard look at this type of surveillance, and I think at the federal level, companies that do this and surveil, and to be perfectly blunt, Dustin, I don't think it's going to change because we've had cookies for generations, and cookies are things that are used to track individuals across the internet.
They're
And
still around. Yeah.
you're right. Everyone's been fine with it. This is just physical, real world cookies. And if the surveillance that's happening that was ushered in by the information age wasn't scaring you at that point with the cookies, get scared now. Because now it's leaving the internet and you're being tracked in the real world. This is not hyperbole. This is not fear mongering. This is the reality. The cookies of the internet are now attached to your car, and there is not much you can get to stop them, but you can try.
And they're not delicious.
And they're not delicious. And anyway, on that lovely note,
That's my PhD comment.
until then, Dustin, say it.
Keep on cyberin.
Keep on cyberin, and we'll see you soon.